Hello, and welcome to episode 16 of the Astrology with Heart podcast. It is lovely to have you back. Today, I'm going to be mainly talking about the new moon we have coming up on the 16th of May. It's going to be at 25 degrees and 57 minutes of Taurus, and it's going to take place at 9 p.m. GMT. As I'm in England, you will need to adjust for wherever you are in the world. Now, if you do happen to have your natal chart with you, and I always say, if you have it printed off, keep it. It's going to be so handy when I'm talking for you to see how this might impact you. I want you to take very special attention to between 24 and 29 of all the fixed signs. That's Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius and Leo, and also around 0 to 3 of the mutable signs, which are Virgo, Pisces, Sagittarius and Gemini. This is where the main event is going to be happening. So our new moon in Taurus is going to be joined by both Mercury and Uranus, adding a slightly different flavor to the Taurus energy of this new moon. So let's talk a little bit about Taurus itself. So Taurus is ruled by Venus. It's the inner feminine nature of Venus. So rather than that need to create a diversity of relationships and be in the outward social expression, the Taurian side is very much more internalized. So it's more about the relationship with self. It's more about what do I value? Well, what do I value in me, but what are my values at large? What kind of skills, strengths, and resources do I have at my disposal? And also, what don't I have? Okay, because this is opposite the Scorpio. So you've got Scorpio in the opposite side, which is about resources with others and what others can bring to the table, but Taurus is more about what I as an individual bring to the table. Taurus rules over our finances, the finances that we build ourselves. Remember, it's all about what I bring to the table, right? The finances that I build, the property that I have, all of the possessions that I have. Okay, and all of this kind of building and creating is really about a sense of security. So the energy itself is slow, steady. It builds things from the ground up. It's very paced energy. It's consistent, like it's not an erratic energy like Uranus. It's a consistent, ploddy kind of build up. This is a sign that you can't rush. If you say, can you do this quickly? No, it's done when it's done, okay? It's about creating something physical, something real, and something sustainable, but also nourishing in the sense of its connection to pleasure. So Taurus rules the sensory system, so our sight, smell, touch, taste. And so there is a connection with what I call the quality things in life, enjoying the sensory experiences of life. There is something in the Taurus archetype that needs to create a very, very strong sense of security. And you can find that in the extreme, that it will just accumulate a lot of things. I'm going to say things, possessions, maybe investment in property or different properties, anything that gives it that sense of self-worth. I value what I own, and that makes me secure and quite safe in my life. And so again, if we're looking at that opposite to Scorpio, there's a Taurus is what I kind of grow and what I have and what I own, what I possess. And Scorpio is more of a what I lose, what I let go of, what I allow to be eliminated. Now, this is a new moon as opposed to a full moon, but the axes still make a big difference to understanding the archetypes and understanding them by contrast and how they work together. I find with Taurus, it kind of buries itself quite nicely into a very comfortable spot, and it kind of roots there. You know, drinking the fine wine, loving a well-cooked steak, assessing its kingdom, looking at the value of what it has, surveying everything that it has, enjoying kind of the simple and tangible and physical pursuits, the fruits of its labor. So if we looked at like the kind of, I suppose, broadly speaking, the role with Taurus is like the farmer. You know, I create something, I grow something, I watch it take form and rise. That is nourishing for the body in a physical sense. Someone that might be in the building trade, so literally the bricks and mortar, and building something and bringing it into physical existence, or even investments. So Taurus would be really, really good with personal finances and building up those finances enough to be able to invest them in something where again they could expand. Maybe something in the food and drink industry, you know, especially maybe a wine grower, you know, has a vineyard, or something associated with homes, perhaps real estate, or the creation of beautiful furniture, especially something like wood turning. There's also that attachment in a very natural form with the natural earth, so feeling the soil, the wood, the stone. Remember the sensory connection too. I just want to remind you that with every new moon, they are new beginnings, they are seeding events, they're the start of something. So if we looked at the shadow side of Taurus, because it all sounds really nice, doesn't it? Connection to pleasure and building something up. Oh, what could possibly be wrong here? Well, the shadow side of any sign shows what can happen if it overdepends, or if it takes something to excess or extremes. And with the sign of Taurus, and I always love this quote, Jeffrey Wolf Green, he was the founder of the EA school in the US. He was talking about different Pluto placements. He said Pluto in Taurus or in the second house is like the frog in the well. It's really funny, isn't it? You know, you got this frog, it's in there in this really safe and comforting space. It knows very well, and it looks out the well and it sees this little patch of blue sky, and it thinks that its patch of blue sky is the entire sky, but it's trapped in that sense of safety. And so the shadow side can be about maintaining that sense of safety to a point of stagnation, of feeling limited or even suffocated in that space, not being willing to move from the point of comfort to explore more of that blue sky. And obviously there are risks attached, right? You know, the frog in the well doesn't know what's going to happen if it moves from the well. It's a very big world out there. There can be a very extreme resistance to change. Remember, it is a fixed sign. It's a sign that in its, you know, shadow sense can be pretty stubborn. And it will tend to stay with what feels familiar. So I used the analogy before of the very comfortable chair. You know, you buy this chair and oh my God, every time you sit in it, it is amazing. And you'll love sitting in that chair, and over the course of time it begins to wear, but you still love it. Eventually someone else in your house is going to say that chair needs to go, like we need a new chair, but you don't want to change the chair because this is your comfort spot. And so you go, no, I'm not going to change this chair is going to stay. You can change other things. This chair is going to stay. It's my chair. And what happens one day is the chair breaks. and you can't fix the chair. So you get pushed to move from the comfort zone and choose something new. And the reason I'm using this little story, it's not completely random, is because of the conjunction with Uranus, which brings in that sense of new, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. I think there can be a feeling of my self-worth is tied to what I have and what I own. So if you're somebody that has been very fortunate financially in the world and can buy pretty much whatever your heart's desires, then you might feel kind of bolstered internally by the fact that you have all this money and all this stuff. And which means that if all of that disappears, you might feel the opposite. You might feel that that you don't have the same level of self-worth. And so there's a learning curve to be had here, that our worth and our value is not necessarily related to the external things that we have. It's about building our inner value and our inner worth within ourselves, understanding that essentially we have the qualities of worth, right? They're not external or separate from us. And so there's a lot of a journey with the Taurus archetype of building inner strength, building inner worth, building inner stability. I think with this new moon too, there can be kind of clinging to routines. So, you know, again, clinging to all of those things that are comfortable, because it's not just, you know, inanimate objects that become comforting. Even people become comforting in our life. Predictability is comforting because we know it. And so we can kind of over-cling to things, over-cling to people, and over-cling to routines. And there's that stubbornness. We get very, very fixated and fixed in it. And it can almost create like a cage. You know, birds are meant to fly. They're not meant to be in cages, but they can come and settle in that cage and feel really good and maybe have a nap and have something to eat. But essentially that's not what a bird is created for. It's not why it has wings, right? So having the new moon in Taurus, right, fixed earth energy, building, planting seeds, looking at sustainability, right? And then we add Mercury and Uranus, Mercury being in the sign of Taurus and Uranus in the next sign of Gemini, right? A light but quick, adaptive, witty, sociable, the data gatherer, Uranus being the higher mind, Mercury being the lower mind, right? There's also an openness to trying something new, more about, you know, as them being more about thoughts and ideas and communication and data, knowledge, categorization, more about talking about new ideas, new ways of doing things, having conversations that are illuminating and insightful, or even within ourselves having these, because Uranus known as the bolt out of the blue, the lightning strike, right? So something comes in and it downloads between the higher mind and the lower mind. And this can be reading a passage in a book, you know, a line in the book that's like, aha, oh my gosh, you know, that's given me some scope, that's given me an idea, that's expanded a part of my mind. It could be a conversation you have with somebody, a random person or somebody that you know very well. It could be from a movie scene. It could be something that you happen to come across online. So whatever it is, can be some kind of communication, thought, sudden download, but it's like a synchronization between the high mind and the lower mind. So this is why we kind of get the real world stuff, because I think sometimes with Uranus it's a bit out there And I know I get lots of these kind of sudden downloads. I've got a very strong Uranian energy in my chart, and suddenly things just click into place. But these shifts are not consistent shifts like the energy with Taurus is. They're just out of the blue. They come in, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Exactly what I needed right now. I think that can be really useful, and I think that this could be hugely valuable. Notice how I say valuable with Taurus? Hugely valuable for opening Taurus up to maybe where it's become very stuck. And I think that is a huge benefit of Uranus, especially, is Uranus wants to strike out on its own. It wants to be independent. It wants to move away from the crowd. And I know I'm talking about this as if it's lots of other people, but move away even from ourselves, You've been stuck in this pattern. You need to suddenly shift. So how it tends to work, and this works a lot with very strong Uranian transits to planets, primarily our personal planets, is Uranus starts to, it starts by, and I'm just explaining the process, how I've always experienced it and other people have told me, you start to get bored. A boredom sets in, right? And it kind of comes in quickly. You realize things that you've always done, or whatever it is that's been kind of very consistent and ploddy and very comforting in your life, suddenly becomes boring. Can't quite put your finger on what has changed, but it doesn't feel the same. And then you get this, what I call an itch. There's like a restless itch. There's a part of you that wants to do something else. Something like sparky, something quick, something different, something original, something unexpected. You just want to move. And it can be kind of annoying feeling to have, but I will urge you, if you're starting to feel that in a particular part of your life, and take a look at your chart, take a look at where this new moon is happening. Right, and bear in mind that, Uranus and Mercury in the next sign of Gemini, so just take a look at where all this is, because it may cross houses, where you might be feeling like, I know I've been always doing this, but I'm starting to feel it's a bit boring, or I'm starting to feel restless, or I'm starting to feel like I want to branch out or kick out of it. And I think with Uranus too, there can be like a rebelliousness. Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. What am I doing this for? This isn't me. Or when did it become not me? Because Uranus is authenticity. It's about having the capacity to step away from that crowd, to be an individual, to walk to the beat of your own drum, to say, this is who I am, and I might not be like you, but that's good. I need to be who I am. So I need to be authentic. I need to be unique. I need to be an individual, right? That's what I should have got to before. I need to be an individual. And so there's kind of a conflict that happens in the archetype of Uranus, because it is very much about community groups and finding my clan. Can't speak. And its association with frequency and vibration is like where we get that phrase, we vibe the same, right? So you want to find people that vibe like you do, because there's almost an alienation feeling within Uranus where I feel different. I'm disconnected from other people. I'm like the observer on the outside. I want you to imagine like a bubble, and everyone else is in this bubble, but you're not in the bubble. You're on the outside looking at the people in the bubble. And there's that very strong feeling of alienation that can happen with Uranus, right? And I think what's nice in this new moon is that there can be an act of realizing that maybe you're different, or realizing that a part of you has changed, or realizing that you want something new or different from what you've had, and feeling quite empowered to do it. I'm going to get into the empowerment bit a little bit later on. where you've got the higher and lower mind, you've got this kind of cohesion that happens, which feels a lot more natural and grounded, I think. Uranus, bear in mind, is air. It's like higher self, up there, air, aviation, flying, right? Space travel. But I think with Mercury being there, it's kind of pulling it down into the lower mind, and it's grounding it a lot more to make it feel a bit more natural, and dare I say it's slightly more comfortable as a thought or an idea or a movement. So I just have a couple of questions I want to chuck in there now, which I think are really relevant while I've just been talking. And so I want you to really have a think about where you are right now and where you're in those comforting patterns and what you have built in your life. I want you to really think about what you've been building in your life and where you're at right now. And if you are starting to feel that this area where you have built is not feeling connected to your true self, your authentic self, where somehow you've started to feel bored or disconnected or restless or feeling like it needs a layer of new to it, I want you to really have a think about that in your life. I want you to also have a real think about where your worth is. And if you were to separate yourself from all the things that you have and you own, would you still feel that same level of worth, right? Would you feel empowered or disempowered? Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I built a beautiful 4-bedroom house on the coast overlooking the beach. I had a really lovely BMW. I had the setup, and my work was going really well, and it just went, right? It just went. I left it all. And this is exactly what can happen when Uranus gets involved with Taurus. And obviously we've had Uranus moving through that sign now, just switching over. So it's quite interesting that we've still got almost a bit like they're still battling some of those themes here in a slightly different way. I also want you to think about your relationship to pleasure. And maybe the things that have always been very comforting and pleasurable to you, maybe it's time to experiment, right? And I'm not being majorly suggestive here unless you want me to be, in any area, right? And food could be one if you want to do it really, really simply. I have this thing when I go shopping that I try to pick out something that I've never had before every time I go shopping, because there is this thing when you go and you get the shopping list, put the same old things on there. And I go, no, do you know what? I'm going to push my palette here and I'm going to try something new. Or I've picked out a recipe, random recipe. Yeah, I like some of the ingredients in it. Great, let's go for it. And this constant part of me that needs to pull away from the comfort. And because I've done it so long, it's very natural. It may not be natural to other people that are very, very rigid. But I urge you just to maybe go to the shop. If you're somebody that buys all the same things, go to the shop once and pick out something that looks magical on the shelf. And you go, do you know what? I'm going to give it a whirl. I'm going to put it into a recipe. Yeah? It doesn't have to be entire life changing like my leaving my life. It can be a very, very small change. Rome wasn't built in a day. But it's really nice to be able to pick our own new, because I think when all these energies kind of happen, and especially with Uranus, which can be very kind of sudden lightning strike, like it's known as the tower in the tarot, like it can really destabilize a routine or destabilize a situation. But I think when we are very consciously and very intentionally choosing that Uranian energy, it helps to lessen that destabilization feel. So if you start to think about where I can bring in something new, where I can be slightly experimental, where I can challenge some of my feelings, because remember the rebel, where I can challenge some of my feelings, safely still, around my self-worth, where I can really consider what I'm building. And if I need to pivot, this energy is going to be really helpful for you to get a little bit more clarity. But not just clarity, not just the mercurial thinking about it, that higher self clarity, you know, kind of, it's going to drop into your mind. You're going to get a better sense of who you are, where you're heading, and alignment with more authenticity. And I just want to keep that really, really top of your mind. Another couple of things on weaving kind of Uranus in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini into this new moon. Liberation and freedom. So what I said about separating and moving away from the crowd. But there's also kind of an internal part of ourselves that might need to liberate or free ourselves from those kind of more inner patterns. So, you know, not just, oh, I'm in this job, but I'm dissatisfied in this job and I'm feeling a spark towards something else. More a feeling internally of something that you have kind of hanging on you wherever you are, like work, home, wherever you are, that you feel like now is a good time to liberate from. I think one of the major benefits of Uranian energy is its ability to be able to kind of step back from something, like have enough detachment in a kind of more neutral state. So kind of eradicate the emotion and all the drama around it and really simplify it and pull itself back and kind of observe the self. And I know I'm getting a little psychological here, and Pluto is obviously in Aquarius, which is, I'm going to get into that later on. That's what I want to talk about. But I mean about using the Uranus approach to free yourself from some of the very kind of chaotic drama and more emotional drama, more human-centric drama. I know we are human, obviously, but Uranus is fantastic, kind of pulling itself back. And one thing that I do, which is really helpful, is when my mind is chaotic or I'm feeling a lot of emotional somatic experience in my body, I put it on paper, because the act of taking it from the self and putting it on paper is kind of a Uranian act, and it allows for a sense of separation. There's lots of things you can do, but that's just one of them. What was the other thing I was going to mention? I've remembered what it is now. The future. So Taurus has a tendency to, it is very present, but it's focus. Yeah, it's very present focus. It's building it kind of consistently day by day. Uranus, however, is more about progression and future focus. So it can allow us to kind of take ourselves out of the day-to-day plod. What can happen when you own your own business, right, is that you'll have this absolute onslaught of tasks, all these duties that you have to do in a day. And it's really important to have periods of time, quite consistent periods of time, I found, where you step out of your daily tasks and you have a chance to observe all of those tasks and everything that's happening in the business from kind of a higher perspective, with a view to not just focusing on the day-to-day, but focusing forward. So I'm doing all of this, and I know I'm building all of this, and that's great. And when I'm in it, I'm just doing, because, you know, Taurus is very physical, and it's very good at doing things. It's very active. But there are times where we need to ensure that what we're building is moving towards the future that we want. That's it, right? Because otherwise we're just building and building and building. We wake up 10 years later and we think, well, I've made it somewhere, but this was not really this is not really a good fit with me, or it's not in alignment for me, or why did I continue for this for 10 years? So it's good to have these check-ins, right? It's good to have these conversations with other people and sense check. Yeah, I'm building this. What do you think? Or is this in alignment? Or, you know me. Or if I talk about it, can you support me with this insight process? Masterminds are brilliant, actually. Or even reading, like breaking yourself out, break away, right, and read some material that you wouldn't normally read. Yeah, what am I reading right now? Oh, you can't see up here. The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, Mind Valley. Really good one. Good few books like this. They just break you out a little bit, and they give you that chance to separate from kind of that being in things to being over them and overseeing them, with a view that sometimes you do just need to check in every now and then to make sure that the future you are creating is the future that you still want, because things do change. I pulled up the chart, and this is the full chart, not the simplified chart, because there's a lot of other things happening, and I've just realized that I said that there was Mercury is in Gemini, and it's not. It's in Taurus. It's Uranus that's in Gemini. My apologies, but most of what I said was about Uranus, so we pretty much covered all of that. But what we can talk about here, and I'll just take a step back, with having Mercury in Taurus, my apologies, is that the lower mind here is going to be very much focused in thoughts and communication on those Taurian themes. So it's going to be focused very much on your sense of survival, what you are building in your life, where you're putting down your roots, what you're sustaining, impact of self-worth, and value, and also thinking about our strengths and our skills and our resources, primarily our inner resources. So that leaves Uranus that little bit standalone, but it's at 3 degrees. It's in a fairly tight conjunction with Mercury there for that kind of higher mind, lower mind dynamic to take place. So this new moon being in Taurus, the ruler is Venus, and we see the ruler Venus here, which is just slightly separate, but it's in the sign of Gemini. So again, we've got the socialite, the messenger, the data gatherer, and this really sets the scene for more relating. That is very sociable. I mean, sure, Venus is pretty sociable by herself, but you put Venus in the sign of Gemini, it's like the chatty Cathy. We could see right now an abundance of kind of social gatherings or getting involved in social activities. Venus is in a sextile, so an opportunistic aspect to Mars in Aries, and a square aspect to Neptune in the early degrees of Aries. So sextile by itself would generally be quite positive. It would be an aspect where it has very strong potential and it requires some effort, but can be very positive if we put in that effort. I think Mars, when it's in Aries, is it's very much the go-getter. So Mars is like how we take action, how we go after what we want, define what we want. Is kind of what gets us out of bed. It's how we fight, and it's very much about our sexuality. And because it's in its own sign of Aries, there can be you've got Venus there, which can be about pleasure, and then you've got Mars there that kind of goes after what it wants, its desires, and in Aries, no hesitation. So I'm kind of just mentioning first that there can be a bit more of an aggressive need to go after what we want, especially when it comes to relating. And you know what? In some senses, that can be totally reckless and probably not a good idea. And I would urge you to have a little think about it. In other situations, you might have put off doing things, and this might give you a very much in the moment gulp of courage to be able to really act on those desires. One thing to think about, though, is that it's also in that square to Neptune. And so squares can be kind of challenging and awkward. They can definitely give us a little bit of a motivation to work on something, but they can be quite challenging. And with Neptune, the challenge can be the rose-tinted glasses. So it can be, this appears to be something, but it might not be quite what you are feeling it is. It could be more of an illusion or a disillusion that will only end up being a disappointment. It could also be something that feels highly addictive. So it's just something to think about, that obviously that sextiles to Mars, I know it's in Aries, but that could be quite reinforcing and really give us courage. But just to have a think about, is what we're having courage for, or what we're going after, or what we're actioning. What is the link here to reality? Am I maybe thinking this is something a little bit more spiritual, magical, better than what it is? Bearing in mind that any kind of addictive substance, Neptune's association with substances, which would be drugs, alcohol especially. So, kind of drop into your body, use that physicality of the new moon, the Taurus energy, which is very physical and very tangible, and kind of, check that this is what you think it is. Don't be scared to walk if it isn't. What we also have going on is we have Pluto in Aquarius, which is now retrograding. It's at 5 degrees. And that is in a trine. So an easy flow aspect, no obstruction, to Uranus in Gemini and Mercury in Taurus. So that Pluto energy is now feeding really, really nicely into this new moon. I mean, it's 5 degrees. It's kind of still within a 10-degree orb of the new moon itself. It'd be a little bit weaker than for the actual moon, but it's definitely going to impact on Uranus and Mercury. And because of them being in conjunction, they're all going to feed off each other. So Pluto has not long been in retrograde, only a couple of weeks. It's going to be in that retrograde for 5 months, and we call this kind of the deep dive into the underworld. So when we see a planet go retrograde, it tends to almost flip what's going on more internally rather than externally. So it tends to be less about what is happening to us on the outside and events in our life, and more about what is happening inside of ourselves in preparation for when it turns back direct and we can start to put it out there into the real world. And with Pluto, I mean, this is the soul. This is the soul, right? This is our deepest desires, often our unconscious desires that we have. This is where we may hold, control, repress, have certain fears and insecurities. This is the underworld. This is our deepest self. This is our psychological self. This is our deeply emotional self. And there are often times in life where we are kind of unaware of maybe those particular emotional, psychological patterns that we feed. And so during the retrograde with Pluto, we have an opportunity here to be able to kind of pull into the conscious and explore some of those things. And they could be pulled out quite speedily with the trine to Uranus and Mercury. And I think, you know, that conversation around where have I been stuck for too long? Where have I been overly comfortable? You know, something needs to change. With Uranus there, something needs to change, and something is going to change. And I call this in my blog post, your comfortable chair gets zapped. You know, it's something needs to give here. Something isn't working. You've been sitting in that comfort zone too long, and this energy is wanting a shift to take place. And I said earlier about you can choose whether energy comes in, or the opposite is that energy is just going to happen to you. And with Uranus, the energy can happen very suddenly and very surprisingly, and it can be quite a shock to the system. It rules the nervous system. Mercury also nervous system. So, you know, it can really affect the body. Both Pluto being, you know, I want the truth, I want every kind of awful thing that is going on within me, I want to know about it. And Uranus also is known as a sword of truth. So they both have an association with truth. This has come up quite a bit in the astrology of late. And I think that Uranus here, with it being a trine, such a like unobstructed flow, could bring in some very intense and very sudden insights about ourself and our patterns, our psychological patterns, our patterns around our desires, and where our fears and insecurities maybe have led us to be in situations that are a lot more comfortable. And this is giving us a lot of opportunity to have that kind of internal dialogue, that allows us to definitely become a lot more aware. And I think, again, this is going to be a bit destabilizing, because once something new comes into our awareness, we cannot go from it. And when Pluto's involved, it's transformation. That is the end game, right? And so it is going to move everything out of the way that is impeding that transformation. So what is going to come up at this time, I think, is going to be a hard hit. And I know I say easy flow, and we often think, oh, trines, yes, they're very positive. They're not necessarily always positive. It just means they're unobstructed. So it doesn't mean that what's going to come up now is going to be very kind to your body or your mind. It might not be. It might be very difficult to listen to within yourself. You know, it could be, especially if it's around your sense of security. But it's an opportunity. You know, it's an opportunity to become aware of those things in order to change them. You know, it can affect, and as I say, really do look at where that new moon, Uranus and Mercury are in your chart. Also take a look at where Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius is. It's going to retrograde between 5 and 3 degrees, so it doesn't go too far, but it's going to be quite intense in that area of your life. It's still in a very wide conjunction with Juno there too, about, you know, your partnerships, contractual partnerships, or broadly speaking, what we partner with. Doesn't have to be another person, but something we partner with. But often it does indicate perhaps another person being involved. You've got Pluto being kind of intensely attached because it's the emotional psychological self. Whereas with Uranus, you've got that, you know, as I said before, about this act of being able to step back and observe itself in a more neutral setting, which I think is hugely beneficial. I think the most important thing to do at this time is to really look after your nervous system as well, with Uranus being so prominent. I'm not a wellness specialist, but I do know that the B vitamins are very good for the nervous system. So maybe do your own research and ensure that you're doing what you can to kind of safeguard your nervous system. Meditation is also can be really nice, and lots of exercise and being around good people in your life. So take care of yourself. I'm going to end, as I always do, with two things. One is some questions for reflection. You will find there are plenty more questions on the blog post, which is in the information below, and also rituals. I'm going to talk about one, and then there's plenty of others on the blog post you can take a look at and try if you wish. So let us just dive into some of those questions that would be really amazing for you to kind of hold in your mind as we're building towards this new moon. So number one is, what does true stability mean for me now, emotionally, financially, relationally? I would even add on there kind of emotionally and spiritually. What does true stability mean for me now? And we've got, what am I building that will last? But I also want to add in there, well, what am I building? What can I step back from what I'm building and ensure I'm building what I really want going forward? So going forward for the future, what is important to me right now? What does my body need that I'm ignoring? Well, this is something I didn't really go into, but yes, Taurus is about the body, the physicality. What am I ready to release so something new can grow? It's a bit of an odd one, but Uranus there is more about kind of what new knowledge am I bringing in that's going to allow me to move or release from something maybe I've been stuck in. So plenty more questions on the blog posts, and I think I'll drop those on my socials as well, just so they're a bit keener in the run-up to the new moon. So one of the rituals, this one is called rebooting. So what you're going to do, you're going to sit or stand barefoot. So ideally you want to be out in nature, maybe on the grass, which is really nice underfoot and very stabilizing for the body. You're going to place your hands on your lower belly, and you're going to breathe slowly until your body begins to soften. So when you're not feeling any tension in the body, when you do those kind of deep belly breaths, and when you get to a point where you feel your body is a lot more relaxed, you're going to ask yourself a question, which is, where do I need to feel more rooted in my life? Yeah, really lovely rooting ritual. And if you've got a pen and paper handy, or you've got notes or something, or even voice record it, just maybe pop on there one practical physical action you can take that is going to support your rooting. So where do I need to feel more supportive, and write down a couple of things that associate with that. And they can be really small, but they kind of need to be honest, authentic, and nourishing. So everything I've mentioned here is on the website. You can read the blog post in full as well. I've got it's a little bit different from the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please do like, review, follow. You can come join me. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. All of the links are below. If you don't have a natal chart and you want to create one, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, I do have a page on the website where you can absolutely do that. You will need your date of birth, your time of birth, and your exact location. I'm telling you, this is gold when we're talking through these. It's going to really show you how these new and full moons are going to impact you. And I'll be back in a few weeks.